The most important job in the world may also be the one we talk about the least. We're going to fix that today because we're going to have a conversation about caregiving with experts who have devoted their lives to the topic. Welcome, everyone. I'm Laura DeFranco, the CEO of Brave Healer Productions Publishing, where we are helping the world experience what's possible. And here today to help me with that mission are some of the amazing authors of one of our newest books. Let me give you guys a little sneak peek of this beauty. The Caregiver's Advocate, Volume 3, A Complete Guide to Support and Resources. You guys, this is an award-winning series. I can't believe we're here at Volume 3. Shout out to Davide De Angelis for this gorgeous cover. Thanks for getting that purple right. I love purple, you guys. I normally, like Denise, match my book covers on my interviews, but I did it with the cup today. So there we go. Huge shout out to Debbie Compton, our lead author of this book. You guys, Debbie had such a huge vision and mission for this book, and thank you, Debbie. We would not be here without you. Thanks for that vision. You gathered around you a stellar group of experts to talk about a really important topic. So thank you for that. And I've got some pretty cool people in my Zoom room. Denise Lefevre is a yoga therapist who has spent over a decade exploring how yoga can support caregivers and their loved ones through Alzheimer's and cancer journeys, and now teaches yoga nidra. And is it Nidra or Nidra, Denise? You have to correct my pronunciation there.
Well, if I was a true Indian, I would say Nidra.
Nidra. Okay. She teaches yoga nidra and serves as an oncology bedside yoga therapist. Denise, thanks for being here. Kaylee Johnson is here. She's a certified health and life coach with over 25 years of caregiving experience who helps caregivers prevent burnout and build sustainable, supported lives. Sherry Davies is here. She runs a private practice in upstate New York and co-founded Surviving the Now, a platform offering support and community for women caring for loved ones with Alzheimer's. All right. So, Sherry, we're going to start this off with you. Tell us a little bit about the why behind this chapter that you wrote for the Caregiver's Advocate.
Yes, and thanks for having me. This is a really important topic for me because as a woman in my 50s who now has a husband who has younger onset Alzheimer's, it was a really challenging time to find any kind of resources that really pertain to caregiving and my story. So, you know, I didn't know where to go. We created Surviving the Now with three other women whose husbands have younger onset. And I thought this chapter for me was really a personal story about how I survive caregiving. And, you don't see a lot of that. You understand a lot of people have, older relatives, things like that. And so for me, when I wrote Layers of Loss, it's when Alzheimer's changes everything. It really was about my personal experience with understanding the grief, understanding how secondary losses come into play, which things that I didn't even know about, how you lose so much. It's not just your partner who is now terminally ill. There's so many other things that you lose along the way. And so, I'm part of the Brave Healer world. I've been in a bunch of other books already. So this was just a really natural progression for me to tell my story as a caregiver and kind of put my knowledge of what I've learned so far on this journey out into the world.
Well, and we are grateful to you for that. So, younger onset. So, someone mentioned in another interview pre grief, and I thought, ooh, I don't know if I've heard. Yeah, and you're nodding. Like, this is awareness for people to help them identify themselves. Maybe they are in a stage of that. And what do you want them to know about that?
Well, I think that there's so much that, you don't understand. Anticipatory grief is when you're grieving a person who is still alive and the grief is real. It's you're losing things along the way. And in the earlier days, my husband was diagnosed in 2019. He was 51 years old. And, at that point, you realize your husband has a terminal illness, so there's grief associated with that. But the things that you don't understand along the way are You lose the dream of your future. That secondary loss right there is ginormous. And, when you're in your early 50s and suddenly you're like, oh my gosh, like we're not going to be sitting on a porch rocking, in our chairs in the neighborhood. Suddenly I know I'm going to be alone. You have to grieve things that you never even imagined. Simple things like when he couldn't drive anymore, the fact that I have to drive all the time, there's grief associated with that. So all these different layers that come along with it are just so significant that nobody talks about.
Yeah, there's different things you're managing. I think some of this gets pushed a little, shoved to the side. And again, Sherry, thank you for writing this story and for this information and awareness and learned wisdom over your experiences. Just it's priceless. That's what all of these chapters are doing, you guys. They're quite amazing. Sherry, thank you for being
Thank
in
you.
this project and being here today. Denise, I'm going to come over to you next. Tell me a little bit about your why.
So my why is driven by the two most important men in my life, my father, who died from Alzheimer's, and my husband, who a decade later suddenly had what may be determined, he hasn't actually been diagnosed, as vascular dementia. And for me personally, the parallels between the behaviors were so similar that while I knew he was going in for heart surgery, I did not expect the brain loss aspect. And as you mentioned, I work with cancer patients, and I see how much caregivers give of themselves in this process. And in both cases, in my father's case, I was witness to my mother's caregiving, and my mother she's ahead of her time in terms of holistic living. She knew how to take care of herself. I didn't. Even though I had the tools, when you're in the midst of it, I didn't know what to do. And I spent all my time, worrying about appointments, making sure medications were right. And I was burning myself out. And I love that Sherry brought up the aspect of anticipatory grief, because here I am 8 years post my husband's situation, 15 years past my father's death. And in writing this book, I finally became aware of how much grief I had, because I have always been a person that does. I see a problem and a challenge and I push through. And I guess the thing that I'm seeing most often in a hospital is that you need to learn how to take self-care, in this case, more than any other case. The patients I see who are terminally ill are most able to accept their diagnosis if they feel like their loved ones can survive. So I look at this as a double mission here. It's not only to learn the tools so that you can be more resilient, but so that you can also help your loved one feel that much more at ease with the terrible diagnosis they're facing. And I think that's true for anything. Dementia is a whole nother situation. I think in my father's case, towards the end of his life, he couldn't even communicate. And so I actually returned to yoga because of him. And that's when I learned that yoga was more than just movement. It was how you connect to people. And so connecting with those who forget is not about doing down dog. It's not about doing tree pose. It's about how do you still see the true nature of that person in front of you, even if they can't communicate with you. And I just wanted to get this message out no matter what the diagnosis was.
Oh, and that's a powerful message. Thank you for all of that. Okay, I do want to rewind to the yoga for just a minute, because I loved how you pulled that in just now. We're not doing down dog, you guys. Like, this is not the thing, but like, what is the thing? Give us just a little bit of that.
So in the clinical world today, fortunately, the medical world has started to see the wisdom of this ancient process. And it's not just yoga, it's also some Buddhist techniques. But 90% of what I do in the hospital is either a breath practice or a guided meditation, or I have a practice which I call joint freeing, assuming they don't have any appendages linked up to machines. We may just move our wrists. We may give ourselves a self massage of the shoulders, the face. But it's just taking time to figure out where you are in your body, mind, and spirit, because yoga therapy works with all of that. And I would say, especially in an end of life or terminally ill situation, most of the effort in my mind is getting to that connecting to our spirit. And the way that I see of achieving that the best is through the breath and guided meditation.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, we're gonna get to more of that in another couple of questions. Denise, thank you for being in this project, for being here today. Haley, tell us a little bit about your why.
Well, my why, and thank you for having me here today, Laura. My why really comes from I feel like I've always been a caregiver my entire life, even as a child, just really having that nurturing part of me. And so um, I started by having a nickname of even Mother Hen in my world. So I've always been drawn to it. So my profession was a professional caregiver in many different capacities, but also in my private life as well. I was a foster parent. I was the caregiver to my grandmother for a very long time, and she was one of my best friends, my biggest advocate. So I really feel like I was able to see a lot of the unique challenges that caregivers were facing and that nobody was talking about, and that there really wasn't support out there, or if there was, it was hard to find. And so going through my own journey with having so much anxiety and feeling so burnt out and so exhausted, um, I was led to being coached through all of that and having this level of support, um, and it like mental health support, but like through a different window. And I learned that it could be different. It just didn't have to be this really hard thing that I had to carry all by myself. That when I could learn to process my feelings, when I could learn to reach out and ask for help, when I could start busting through some of the old stories that were going on in my brain, like if I need help, that means I'm weak. I should be able to do this all on my own. When I learned all of that, I was like, wow, that it was just such a big shift in my energy. I wasn't in that exhausted, I wasn't in that resentful space. I was able to release the guilt, and I was like, wow, I just want to share this with other caregivers, because it doesn't have to be so hard. Yes, it's going to be very challenging, but going through the things that I learned and the support that I didn't even realize was available is really what I'm passionate about, supporting caregivers in that way.
So you said something that gave me a moment, and you were talking about even when I was little, I realized I was in a role like this. And I think people might be nodding their heads, but just now, like you just realizing, oh yeah, like I was taking care of adults in my house
Mhm.
because I was the more mature one, or whatever that was. What else do you want to tell us about that?
Well, just like tuning in and recognizing like that was something I was doing unconsciously by the time I was, an adult, but it was all of these unconscious patterns that I was doing, whether I was trying to keep the peace by things that I had learned and never questioning, like, if um, as long as I was exhausted by the end of the day, that meant that was, I I had earned rest. And so really realizing I was sourcing all of my worth through giving. And that's great, but it was over giving. And that's where I had no boundaries. I didn't understand that I was allowed to rest, and get refueled as well. And so I always share with my caregivers that you make time to get gas in your car. You make time to charge your phone. But when it comes to us, it's just like a foreign, I don't have time for that, but it doesn't have to be hours and hours. We can do recharges in short periods of time as well, as I like to call them self-care snacks even. And then it kind of breaks that that I can't, I don't have time. But what if I do? What if actually taking 5 minutes is what's going to get me through my next challenge?
Yes, thank you for going down that road a little bit with me. Did you guys hear, like, as long as I was exhausted, that was out, it was my, yeah, like, oh no, you know. And then also all of my worth came through giving. I know people are going to be nodding to this. Like, yeah. Um, okay. The question I have next for all of you is just going to take this topic that we're on already and kind of dive deeper on it. Denise, I'm going to start with you for this one. We've already started to talk about it a little bit. Caregivers often burn out. Many of them burn out. And I know you all have experiences, either personal or helping others with this. What's a simple step for the listeners, a simple step they can take if they're all in it, like in that burnout today?
I think, this sounds so simple. And even though I've been studying yoga now for several decades, even though I had that knowledge behind me when I was a caregiver, I forgot to pause and take a mindful breath. I was so intent about receiving the latest medical information, figuring out how many more specialists were going to be added to our day. When my husband went in for a surgery, I was still working full time. And then it became very obvious that wasn't possible. So I immediately put my work on hold. I retired. But I didn't take care of myself. Even though I retired so that I would have more time with him, I still forgot about myself. So, to Kaylee's point, I really, really like the idea of these yoga snacks or self care snacks. It doesn't have to be yoga. One of the things I did naturally with my father, which helped us both, is we moved to music together. And he couldn't speak, but we found a way to connect it from music that we both loved. So finding what gives you joy and passion, and even if it's only 2 minutes to 5 minutes to connect with that a couple times during the day, that can be enough to help fill your cup.
I love that one. Music is profound tool to use, but so is, I'll back up to your pause and take a breath. Like it is simple, but you know, it's also profound. Um, okay, Kaylee, this question was probably made for you. Talk to us about this burnout. What's a simple step? What's one of those snacks? Tell us.
Yeah, so like I said, people feel like often if I don't have 30 minutes or an hour to move my body, like I don't have time. So I really invite my caregivers to just start with 5 minutes, just 5 minutes, and see how you feel. Like what starts to happen is when we open that door to maybe 5 minutes of yoga, which I just have to double click on for a minute because my husband had injured his back severely where he was going to need back surgery, and he was really scared about that. And when he met with the surgeons, he said, I want to try other things first. So one of the things they suggested was yoga. And so that was 6 years ago. We've been doing yoga every day together since, and he never needed the surgery. So I just like it was amazing. Just to talk about yoga for a minute. But yeah, something like you could do a chair yoga, a 5 minute standing yoga, whatever it is, but a little bit does go a long way. And it doesn't need to be hours and hours. So that's just really, and it could be a healthy a meal that you just make every day, so it's easy and simple, and you know how to do it. But that's another place where people get stuck. Like, I can't eat healthy because I just don't have time. Like really helping them see that we can get an easier route to that, but we have to lean in and allow support.
Yes, thank you. Good ones. Yeah, I'm so excited to hear the story of didn't have to have the surgery. Gotta love those stories, right? All right, Sherry, how about you on this one? If you're thinking a little bit about burnout, maybe someone is just in it. What's a simple step you want to offer?
So for me, one of the things that is a little off different than kind of the day to day is really finding who your support people are. I know in those first 4 years, I didn't know anybody who was dealing with younger onset Alzheimer's. Like my grandmother had it, my husband's grandfather had it. So you know these older people who have it. It's a very different disease when you're in your early 50s and how it impacts your life. And so finding three other women just it was so random how we came together, but finding that support and being able to just, whether we're having a Zoom meeting every other week just to communicate with each other, whether it's just through texting, but not feeling alone anymore, really changed my dynamic of how I felt. I really was in that space of caregiver burnout, and just having that support of somebody who understands, because I have great friends, I have great community, I have a great therapist. But finding somebody who's going through what you're going through, I think is really helpful, or at least at the very least, somebody who really understands what you're going through. So that support for me was really a game changer in terms of like my own, you know, I do all the other things, right? We talk about sleep, food, try and do those things. It comes and goes, but having that support of people that understand you is really important.
Very important. I'm really glad you brought that one up. And it's a perfect chance to tell you all about the phenomenal resource section in this book. So there are places to reach out to, people to reach out to. The entire author cast is there to reach out to. But kudos to Debbie again for pulling together a really amazing resource section. You don't have to sit there alone, and you can find somebody like that to talk to, more than talk to, get support that you need. So I want to give you all a chance to talk about a little bit more about your tool. You all are gifting the readers with some of your lifetime's worth of wisdom here and experiences, and they're going to get a practical tool in the book. Kaylee, what's the most important thing you want to leave us with in terms of that caregiver burnout?
Yeah, so my chapter is titled "I'm Not Running on Empty Anymore." So, like you said, it makes total sense with this. So just really recognizing that's one of the biggest challenges I see, and I personally lived, is that exhaustion and burnout. So the thoughts that we're thinking while we're caregiving, that's the biggest thing. And it might sound like, oh, well, what does that have to do with anything? But um, because it's not just the tasks like like Denise was sharing, it's all of the things, the appointments, the medications, that's part of what's draining our battery and causing the exhaustion. But the other part is that consistent inner dialogue and what we're thinking while we're doing it. Like, am I thinking I have to do it all? Or am I thinking I'm already exhausted and the day hasn't even started? That is the other half of what's draining our battery, is what that internal dialogue is. So, or if we're living in the worst case scenario thoughts, um, like I said, we just burn out before our feet hit the floor. So I'm passionate about that pause, helping caregivers with that pause, taking that breath, and really getting curious about their thinking. And how could we reframe that? What thought would support me right now? Like, does it feel better when someone's cheering you on when I'm maybe doing something really hard, if I'm going through an obstacle course or something? Um, but that's not what we do inside of our own head. So really shifting that creates a big change for the caregivers. And like I said, myself included.
I'm so glad you brought up mindset, because like every other topic of life, it matters. You're creating your world as you think. And so for this particular topic, as a caregiver, really being mindful of that daily habit or pattern of self-sabotage or
Mm.
negativity. Oh my gosh, how oh, don't get me started on this one. I will be here for 3 more hours, because that is a big topic, but really important. And you said this may sound whatever, but oh no, like this is it, you guys. Like this can drop your stress levels. It can help your nervous system. It can help your physical body, right? The mindset. You can tell I get excited about this topic, right? Um, all right. So Sherry, I'm going to move over to you with this. What do you want to leave us with here? What's the most important thing you want us to know about those layers of loss?
When I wrote this chapter, it really gave me an opportunity to look back at kind of my own journey so far. And I think self-compassion is really one of the things that I really came up with, is because you make so many mistakes as a caregiver, right? Like you can have the best intentions, you think you're doing a great job, and then something goes sideways and you're like, "Oh my God, what happened?" And it's really easy to beat yourself up. And I think most of us, particularly women, we want to do a great job and we want to do things the right way. And so I think a lot of times we do beat ourselves up more. So self-compassion is really, I think, an important piece of this. And just understanding, for me, as I wrote the story, I talked about the loss, but I also talked about the resiliency that comes along with what you do and how it's changed and grown throughout my journey, is things that I took a weed whacker apart and put it back together when, a couple weeks ago, and it's something, thank God for YouTube, right? Like, but things that you don't think you can do, you're a lot stronger than you think you are. And if somebody on the outside tells you that, you're like, ugh, but if you can see yourself doing it and really kind of take that time to look within yourself, there's resiliency in your journey as well. And I think that helps fuel when you have burnout and when you're not feeling like you did a good job, is reminding yourself, we all kind of laughed when I said that about the weed whacker, but I think about that as like, okay, I can do hard things. And so, when I wrote my tool, nobody thinks about really these little small things you can do for self-care. And I kind of divided into what are tiny things, those snacks, right? Medium times if you have, little chunks of time, and if you have a bigger chunk of time, but things as simple as like coloring, right? Getting a coloring book, coloring sheets, right? Just that kind of repetitive meditation of coloring, things like that. But, I do think you have to really have a lot of self-compassion for yourself as a caregiver, and really understand that you have a lot of resiliency in what you're doing. Like you can't survive this without it.
How did you know I was staring at my broken weed whacker the other day in the garage, wondering if I could do anything about it? How did you know that?
You
Uh,
can trust me. If I could, I am not technical, like handy like that at all, and I did it.
that cracked me up that that was your example. What is it about the weed whackers? Thank you, Sherry. Coloring. Yes, with an exclamation point to that. I love coloring. All right, Denise, you're going to wrap us up today. What's the most important thing you want us to know about using yoga for stress relief?
Um, well, to me, yoga is the biggest benefit is the tool of self exploration with no judgment. And I think that there's enough judgment to go around, either you for yourself or other people observing you in the caregiver role. And the other thing that's a big difference today versus when I went through this and my mother went through this, there's a lot of virtual opportunities, and the resources in the book give a lot of that. You're not alone. And even though I personally prefer to connect with people in person, don't let that be the obstacle. Don't let the fact that you can't drive X amount of distance to get in the way of everything else you're doing. Find the things that you can do that fit into your schedule. And then just give yourself a little mantra of, I'm doing the best I can. I'm doing the best I can. And again, that goes to Sherry's point about self compassion. I think my biggest takeaway is that even though I would not want anyone else to have to go through what my family has been through, it it grows you as a person. It grows you. You get to understand what's important, and you don't take things for granted anymore. So nourish that muscle if you can. How do you better appreciate yourself and recognize you're doing the best you can, and there's still joy to be had in life?
Mm. Wonderful way to wrap this up. All right, Denise, Sherry, Kaylee, thank you so much for what you do in the world. And thank you for being here today to share it with everyone. As you guys can hear, this is way more than a book. This is a very generous community, and they're there to answer a question, give you the support. Drop down into the show notes because I have everybody here hooked up with their websites. Go click and explore. They have some wonderful offerings, and you're definitely not alone in this amazing caregivers advocate community. Of course, we would love for you to go grab your copy of this beautiful book. So I've got the link down below for that too. And lastly, today, everyone, remember your words change the world when you're brave enough to share them. So it is time to be brave. See you next time, everyone.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Sherry and Callie.